When you realize you are sick, what do? You rest, take medicine, avoid contact with harmful agents, and stay away from things that could worsen your condition. This is the natural understanding and self-discipline that every person instinctively applies when facing illness. And that's for minor diseases, like the common cold, a cough, or a mild fever. But what happens when the illness is serious, severe enough to threaten your life? Worse still, what if you lack the discipline to prevent it in the first place? This is exactly what happens when you fail to exercise discipline during an epidemic, and the first of such diseases brought forth the downfall of European civilization, the plague that sparked the apocalypse of They called it the Black Death, but it wasn't black, it was invisible. A silence creeping beneath doors, clinging to breath, hiding in the threads of a traveler's cloak. A merchant arrived in Messina in 1347, coughing blood into his sleeve, and by nightfall, the city had begun to rot from the inside out. Priests walked door to door, not with sermons, but with carts for bodies. Rats scurried over marble floors, unconcerned with kings or commoners. And as plague swallowed Europe, something ancient stirred within the hearts of those who survived. A question, a fear, a choice. Would they bow to the unseen or learn to see it? Contagion has never just been a disease of the body. It is a riddle, an echo. It asks who we are when everything safe is stripped away, when every hand might carry death and every breath might betray you. In those moments, truth is no longer an idea, it is discipline. The kind that led a physician in Ragusa, on the Adriatic coast, to order ships anchored offshore for 40 days, 40 giorni. The birth of quarantine, not from certainty, but from responsibility. From the understanding that ignorance was no excuse for inaction. In Constantinople, when the Justinian plague brought the empire to its knees, Emperor Justinian himself fell ill. His court panicked. His enemies celebrated. But in a small monastery outside the walls, monks preserved the texts of Galen and Hippocrates, not because they were useful in that moment, but because they believed truth waited on the other side of chaos. They copied by candlelight as the world burned. That is medicine, a vow not to the present comfort, but to the eternal pursuit of knowledge. And centuries later, when the world bled again in 1918, the Spanish flu did not ask who deserved to live. It simply came, with the silence of exhaled breath and the certainty of math. Soldiers in trenches coughed crimson foam into mud. Nurses collapsed beside the patients they tended. Whole families died in a single week. But in the midst of that despair, a small team at the Rockefeller Institute began experimenting with killed virus vaccines. They failed, then tried again, and failed again. But every trial was a testament that action in uncertainty is the foundation of progress, that even in darkness we reach. Discipline is not the absence of fear. It is how you stand when fear has made its home in your blood. It is Joseph Lister, scrubbing his instruments with carbolic acid while colleagues laughed, choosing sterility over tradition. It is Semmelweis, ostracized for suggesting that doctors should wash their hands. It is every voice that was ridiculed for sounding the alarm before the fire became undeniable. Because medicine, real medicine, is never convenient. It asks you to change before the cost becomes visible. The truth about contagion is that it forces a mirror into our hands. Are we reactive or proactive? Do we seek scapegoats or solutions? During the cholera outbreaks in London, many blamed the poor, the foreign, the unfamiliar. But one man walked the streets, mapping the deaths. John Snow found the broad street pump, and with one act, one removed handle, shifted the world toward epidemiology. He didn't wait for consensus. He let the data speak before the dead could multiply. Because the enemy is not just the virus, it is delay, denial, disbelief. The idea that we are too modern, too advanced to be humbled by something microscopic. But we are not. We never were. The Antonine Plague humbled Rome, smallpox scarred generations, and when AIDS emerged, cloaked in stigma and silence, it was not the pathogen that failed us, but our refusal to listen, to see, to care. Contagion reveals character. It uncovers the hidden architecture of a society. Who gets tested, who gets treated, who gets remembered. When Ebola struck West Africa, it wasn't the international task forces that first responded. It was local doctors, often unpaid, wrapping themselves in garbage bags to make makeshift PPE. It was mothers who buried their dead with gloved hands because no one else would come. It was not the scale of the threat that revealed greatness. It was the scale of the response. Discipline is preparation in the absence of applause. It is public health workers knocking on doors to distribute vaccines. It is researchers running experiments that no one funds. It is governments choosing prevention over profit. And it is every individual, you, me, us, who decides to act not when it is easy, but when it matters most. Not because of fear, but because of wisdom. The truth about Contagion is that it isn't over. It never was. The pathogens change their names, the hosts change their habits. But the laws remain. That breath is a bridge. That contact is a contract. That survival is a decision we make together. And discipline, real, sustained, humble discipline, is our only shield that does not rust with time. And in the echoes of every plague, every outbreak, every fevered night of history, there is a whisper, a warning, a promise, that what we do now, in the quiet before the next storm, is the true test of our civilization. Not our science alone, but our memory, our willingness to learn, and our resolve to never again forget the price of forgetting. Because even in the most forgotten corners of the earth, the flame of medical wisdom has never died. It lived in the papyrus scrolls of Imhotep, the Egyptian sage who built temples not only of stone, but of healing. It breathed through the words of Avicenna, whose canon of medicine became a compass for centuries of wandering minds. And it guided Florence Nightingale, who walked hallways of the Crimean war hospitals with a lamp in her hand and statistics in her pocket, proving with data what compassion already knew, that light, cleanliness, and dignity were not luxuries, they were lifelines. She wasn't just healing wounds, she was changing the battlefield of medicine itself. In a time when germs were still a theory and sanitation an afterthought, Nightingale built systems, tracked numbers, created models. She turned care into calculus and mercy into measurable change. Because when lives hang in the balance, kindness without structure is not enough. Hope without discipline is only noise. That same spirit moved through the mind of Rudolf Virchow, who declared that medicine is a social science, and politics nothing but medicine at a larger scale. He knew the enemy was never just in the blood, but in the systems that poisoned it. Malnutrition, poverty, injustice. These were not the side stories. They were the conditions in which Contagion thrived. He didn't treat disease in isolation. He treated it as a symptom of a deeper disorder, inequality. So when you ask what discipline looks like, don't imagine cold routines and sterile commands. Imagine the quiet force that underlies every leap of healing humanity has ever made. It is not loud. It does not beg for headlines, but it moves mountains. It is Jonas Salk, refusing to patent the polio vaccine because he believed it belonged to the people. It is Kizzmekia Corbett, the young scientist behind the COVID-19 vaccine, spending sleepless nights in the lab while the world outside panicked. It is millions of nameless hands pulling thread through cloth to stitch masks when factories fell silent. It is a nurse who enters the isolation ward, knowing the risk because someone must hold the line. It is the janitor who disinfects the waiting room, unseen but essential. It is the child who learns to cover their cough, the teacher who opens windows for air, the elder who endures loneliness for the safety of others. Every act, no matter how small, is a brick in the wall between life and loss, and that wall is not built in times of crisis, but before them, through practice, through principle, through the quiet vow, I will be ready. There is no final victory against Contagion, only vigilance, only the ceaseless balancing act between freedom and responsibility. And in that balance, the truest legacy of medicine is found, not in the miracles, but in the moments when humanity chose to become more than itself, to rise above instinct, to care beyond bloodline, to act not because we were told to, but because we understood. And that understanding, that medicine is not merely a field but a force, is the inheritance of everyone who has ever held the hand of the sick. It does not belong only to the experts. It belongs to the vigilant, the compassionate, the disciplined, to you. And last, I hope you come to truly understand, respect, and cherish your own body, for it is the only vessel that carries you through this life, deserving of care, discipline, and gratitude.